Hello. Can y'all hear?
We can hear you. We couldn't hear Dr. Laws a minute ago.
I don't know what's wrong. I see he's trying to get back in.
I tell you, you should have seen how happy they were because they couldn't hear me.
Yeah, I know the feeling. We all rejoice. It's just those little things in life that just get you through.
We were just plotting the demise of Mary's department head. It's no big deal. We got enjoying ourselves and eating cake.
Eating cake. All right.
Well, there's Sarah eating. So let's start off with Andy. What are you eating?
My second bowl of garlic Parmesan chicken pasta. I'm super into my Instant Pot right now. We're having quite the love affair. And, you know, when pasta only takes 4 minutes, it's not really that bad.
Yeah, that's a pretty good deal. Leah, what are you having?
She's having her toddler's leftovers.
I'm going to go with Andy's so far. Ooh.
Stacy has cake.
It's a lovely cake. It's a you make it with a cake mix, but you kind of doctor the cake mix up, and then I make homemade caramel and I pour it over the top, and then it soaks down in the cake. And I'm sitting here eating cake and drinking my second cup of coffee.
That's a good way to end the day. All right. Well, Jennifer's having internet issues. So that's maybe it's in Gaston County that we're suffering tonight. Welcome everybody to your third Zoom, third of 4. This time next Tuesday, you will be essentially through. You'll be through with the Tuesday night Zooms with the 601. Dale and I talked today, and Dale, you can tell them or I can tell them, but I don't think this will bring a heartbreak, but I think with COVID the way it's still acting, we probably will do better to do our second weekend remotely, and again, it's just out of I guess what we would say caution for all of you and what you're going through on a daily basis. I think even though you don't know us, I think you could probably tell that Dale and I would prefer to be together, and we enjoy the interaction that face-to-face brings. So we hope you're disappointed, and I suppose we would open up to being talked into doing it, but I just don't think at this point it's smart, and you need to make plans. So we thought we would tell you tonight. So the Maxwell Day on Saturday, whatever that day is, the second Saturday in October, is easily done remotely and with Zoom, and then Sunday we switch over and Dale will do it. I can tell you that as we talked today, which he called it at 8 o'clock this morning, and I was I needed to drop my daughter off at work because her car was getting it went in for its inspection, and so I dropped her off at work, just let her out. He called, and it takes me 50 minutes to get to Gardner Webb, and Dale talked the whole time. I got 2 words in, I think, but he was on a rant this morning, and so it made the time go quickly. And seriously, I hear a baby. What am I hearing?
Oh, I'm sorry. It was Daisy.
Okay.
I didn't realize. That
that's
she was
fine.
whining.
Yeah, but anyway, we got to work. But Dale and I talked, and we do hope that you want to be with us the last weekend, so that we can do one time together. in face-to-face fashion. You can enjoy the food that Dale and to a lesser extent I provide, and the fellowship that all of you have grown accustomed to in your program. And the last day is going to be, I think, a whole lot of fun for us as well. So we're going to keep that as a goal. Again, I hope you're somewhat disappointed, but I hope you're in agreement with what we have decided. If not, then I'm sorry we're letting you down, but I think it's the best thing. And Dale thinks it's the best thing. He can speak for himself. So let's start off with what we typically do, which is story time. And so does anybody we haven't been together for a week, so any stories? And you got a story.
Well, at 2:30 today, I got a call from my twin girls' school saying that they had been identified as close contacts and they will be virtual until Tuesday, as long as they don't test negative. I'm going to have them tested on Friday. Oh yeah, as long as they don't test positive. So now I'm also teaching remotely so that I can be with them. That's my news. Kind of threw me through a loop this afternoon.
Yeah, that's not the news you wanted to hear, I am sure. Anybody else?
The saga continues with my female student who wants to be a boy and have boy parts. We got a dojo message from her dad now telling us that she wants, her name is Issa, instead of us calling her Issa, she wants to be known as Moth. And she wants us to refer to her as he, they, or them. Yeah.
But the parents in support of it, like the
The
parent.
parents are, yeah, this was a message from him. I'm gonna call her Issa. I can't get with the Moth thing, but she was playing with some boys. She's decided she wants to sit with the boys now. And so she, without thinking, I said, guys, stop. And then I caught myself. And she said, oh, it's okay. That's what I identify with. No worries. And we were doing cahoots today, and you have to make the nickname. And her nickname was My Balls Hurt. Yeah.
That's that'll go down as another reason why I'm glad I'm old.
Yeah.
It's that would
Yeah.
Now, what grade is this, Phyllis?
This is 4th grade.
Well, I don't think you ought to be able to change your pronouns until you know what pronouns are. If you can't diagram a sentence yet, that ought to be
Right.
the litmus test on that. That's just a thought.
Well, in that case, I think I've got, some high school seniors who can't change their pronouns because they sure can't diagram a sentence.
Well, that's what I mean. Until you're
Y'all
at
write
least
one first.
I was
intellectually
kidding.
mature enough to do that, then y'all stick with what you got right now. But again, I'm glad I'm not I can't keep up with all of that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I guess that's what part of the part of fluid is it can change back and forth, but I think we've gone too far. I think we've lost our common sense on some of these things. I saw, who was it? Dan Savage last Friday night. He's a leading LGBTQ plus person. And even he has to acknowledge that some of this is getting a little bit ridiculous. And it distracts from the actual grown folks who have issues. When we let 9-year-olds start doing this, it kind of makes light of the whole situation, unfortunately. So, but I guess we don't seem to have any common sense anymore. But 9-year-olds should not be making these kind of calls. Their parents should not, and should not be facilitating that, I'm afraid. That's gonna cause a lot more issues
Well,
down the
I
road.
believe,
But that's-
I believe Phyllis has a facilitating dad for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah,
Enabling, facilitating.
enabling.
You
Yes,
know, whatever. You know, we've all dealt with enabling parents our whole careers, but this is a whole new level.
this is too far.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is too far. This is harmful to children.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that we're harming, we're allowing children to be harmed. You know, they need parents, not friends. They got enough friends. They need parents. And so we've jumped the shark, I'm afraid.
Hmm.
All right, well. Mercy. That's about all I can say, Phyllis, is mercy.
Yeah,
That's it. There's nothing else to say.
Yeah, and to the rest of you too, with what you're battling on a daily basis. Dale and I, we literally talked about it all the way today, seriously, all joking aside. I'm sorry for you, but we're gonna try to make tonight as good as we can, and we will be out at 8 o'clock. And so we'll stay on track. And so tonight, so now we shift into the case studies, which, as you pointed out last week, this book is a bit different, and I think it can be beneficial because, in a sense, these textbooks are designed to teach us things, but I would prefer a case study book not to give the solution according to the author. However, there is some merit to that, in that, as you see when Dale and I banter back and forth, or you and each other banter back and forth, or you and us banter back and forth, we don't always agree. So it doesn't mean that what the author came up with here is necessarily the be all end all. What we want to do tonight is give an overview of the case. You folks talk together in your subgroups, talk about what you see as the major issue, what you see, or issues, what you see as maybe some sub issues with it, and the solution that you feel is appropriate and doesn't agree with what the text says. And then Dale and I will give our 2 cents worth in addition to yours, and open any other conversation. There are 9 to be discussed tonight, so we'll keep track of time. I will. So in my calculations, about 10 minutes apiece for the cases. And that should finish us up just before 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock. Had 9 on my mind. I know y'all were cringing there for a second. And 8 o'clock, and then we'll say goodnight. So let's get started. I'm gonna bounce around my groups. So we'll do the first one assigned to each group, and then the second one assigned to each group, and the third one, and go that way. So with that, the first group is Rebecca, Ann, Stacy, and Leah. And we have already one of my pet peeves, 21st century school leadership. I want to know, first of all, what year in the 21st century do you think schools can begin using 22nd century thinking? Anybody got a thought on that? It drives me crazy that every goal we have is geared toward the 21st century, and we're 20 years into it.
Well, if we're going to start preparing them for it, we probably need to kind of start figuring out what that's going to look like so that we can start preparing them, not waiting until the 22nd century.
Yeah.
And did we,
Go
When
ahead.
did we start using the term 21st century?
Well, I'm trying to think because Dale and I would have both been administrators. And Dale, I don't recall 21st century thinking, 21st century skills being a common term even in the 90s. Do you?
No, it wasn't.
So it was almost like we picked up this real neat term that we're just gonna capitalize on once we passed Y2K, and it just sounded so good. We want our children prepared for the 21st century. And I'm just kind of sitting there saying, wait a minute, we've been in the 21st century. And most of the students, all of the students that you folks have, many of the students that Dale and I have in our program they didn't even live in the 20th century. And none of the ones that you're exposed to now have, so it just already touched a nerve. But anyway, you don't have to mess with it. But I do tell my dissertation students, they better not put 21st century thinking in their dissertation. I'm gonna bounce it back to them. And our first class in EDLS is a leadership class for strategic. We call it strategic leadership. And so they have to study strategic plans and give their district's strategic plan. And every one of them is just inundated with 21st century, 21st century, 21st century. And so I don't know. I think at some point we've got to get past that of preparing students for the 21st century. We're past preparing them. They're in the 21st century. But anyway, that's another thought. Group 1, tell us about case 1.
All right. I'm going to talk about what the case study said, and then we all have different parts. But I'm not going to tell you what the name of the study was, because I don't want Dr. Laws to get bent out of shape about it. But Port Valley Central High School needed a new principal. They formed a committee. They determined a clear directive for what was needed based on standards, which is, I guess, what they were supposed to do. They combed through resumes. They did phone interviews. They whittled it down and or funneled it down until they got to 2 candidates, Marie and Kate. When they got to Marie and Kate, they brought them both in before the planning council, and Marie and Kate were equally qualified, basically is what it says. And Marie was very polished and articulate, and she just laid her plan out to the planning committee and was told them what she would do, etc. if hired. And then Kate, equally polished, but wanted to know what the committee, what they thought, their thoughts. She asked for their input rather than tooting her own horn. And that's basically how her interview went. And the questions were on the next slide. Go ahead, whoever's next.
Okay, so the question, the first one was evaluate the selection criteria developed by the hiring committee. And this is background within our scenario. The hiring committee, they first developed selection criteria by measuring leadership skills based off of their standards. Then they looked at the applicant's experience, knowledge of instruction and curriculum, familiarity with the use of data as a guiding tool, and then oral and written communications. That was the first part. Then after that, they require the candidates to provide a complete achievement-oriented resume and cover letter. And then the next stage was they went through phone interviews with the committee. And if they made it to the second round, they they became familiar with the school and did a round of all-day meetings. And then if they made it to the final, they did 1-hour meetings with the planning committee to present their ideas on teaching philosophies, visions for the school, different changes they wanted to make, and how they could cultivate the culture into positive learning. So what do you guys, I guess, feel maybe was a problem, or was there not enough stuff involved in that?
All right, so for the group here, one of the things, let's talk about the protocols for hiring. What do y'all think of those? What would you look for if you were hiring a principal? And how would you gather that the candidate was who you wanted based on that criteria?
So we just got a new principal, and one thing that I felt they left off was getting feedback from the staff. We were all given a questionnaire about what our vision was for the school and how we wanted to change and who we wanted to put, not who, but like what type of person we wanted to lead us. So I think maybe some staff input would have helped too.
And I agree with that, I guess. Jennifer sent a chat, one who was, Jennifer, now I've lost it here. Willing to listen, what is it?
One who is willing to listen and
Collaborate.
collaborate.
So if you're interviewing me, what are you going to ask me to determine if I'm willing to listen and collaborate? How are you going to gauge that?
Describe the time when he works with others.
How are you going to determine that? I mean, I can promise you, I will tell you I'll do that.
Could you have them describe, like Leah said, a time where they had to work with others specifically in like a problem solving capacity, which would require communication, listening, and all of that? And if they explain that to you, that's showing that at least they understand, even if they're lying through their teeth, which we hope they're not, but at least they understand how to do so.
Well, am I wrong, or I mean, I don't know. I'm asking. In interviews, I've never been interviewed for a principal's job, but do they not give you scenarios sort of similar to these to talk about? I know when I did that curriculum coach interview, I was given a couple of scenarios where I had to, break down situations and what I might do in those situations, which would tell others if I have all of those skills or not. So.
I agree, and I see that Elizabeth said call references. So again, there are some dangers with references. There's some dangers in a lot of the ways that we try to determine if this person's a good fit or not. Certainly you can see their comfort level, their presence, their presentation, those kind of things in an interview setting. The references are important. The key on references, in my opinion, Dale may have a different one. And I think I've said this to you before. If I'm listing 3 references or 5 references, surely to goodness, I am listing people who are going to say good things about me. So one of the keys that I always try to do was to call other people and certainly to talk to the current supervisor in some fashion, unless the candidate just said you absolutely cannot, because if I don't get the job, I don't want them to know I'm looking. And then I'll have to figure out something else. But those are important things to do. So I do think checking references checking references beyond those listed is an important thing for us to do. Dale, I would imagine back in the day that CMS probably did those inbox activities, didn't they?
Yeah, we did. There are 4 levels of interviews for principal generally, or assistant principal. CMS, we did. We initially did inbox, the decision making, the reasoning activities like principals in basket. We then went to perceiver, where a person interviewed you using the Gallup perceiver. I was trained in Gallup perceiver. It takes a year with a Gallup to do that. And then that morphed into virtual interviews with scenarios. And so those are 3 of that's for the cattle call. That's the initial interview. And then, so reasoning, scenarios with data, and perceiver, where they ask you a series of 60 questions, 12 at a time. Those are the 3 most common for the cattle call interviews, the initial. But then CMS did, and one of the better things to do for what you're talking about here is put together a group of people with a specific set of questions to see if that person could interact with different. You'd have a community person, you would have a teacher, you'd have teachers, you would have administrators, you'd have business leaders, you'd have students if it were secondary, to see if that person could collaborate and could speak to those different people on their level. If you can't communicate with them at their level, then you can't collaborate. When I do our interviewing section, I'll go over that. And so, one of the things that we have to remember to do is educators is to put our jargon and acronyms away. We can't say, if they say, well, how are you going to do this? You can't, well, I'm just going to form a PLC. Well, the community people don't know what a PLC is. So obviously you're going to have a hard time collaborating with them if you can't communicate with them. And so the notion here in this case is, regardless of what the initial, whether it's in basket reasoning data or perceiver, it's really that second level. Can you communicate? If you can, then there's the potential that you can collaborate. But if you can't even communicate, then collaboration will not follow. And kind of a side note, I was in a conference recently, and the superintendent down in Martin County said what they're doing now, they're taking that a step further, and they're bringing all the candidates in, and they're putting them with people, and they do a series of activities over the course of a day to see if you can actually collaborate with others, because that's the most important piece, is trying to determine whether folks, you can know the standards. I know the standards. I know the questions. I can do the in-basket activity. I'm a trained perceiver. I can tell you how to get a 60 on that. But it's that, can you work with people? Can you communicate, then therefore collaborate? That's the trick. And how are you going to do that? And it's hard to determine in an interview situation. It is hard to do that. But absent being able to put people together in a room and watch them for a day, the best is to have a very diverse panel of people, ask them questions, and see if they're able to communicate with those people on the level that they are on. That's pretty much the standard in our business today.
All right. So the last thing I'm going to ask. So we differentiated between these 2 candidates, one being more kind of like task oriented, and the other one being more people oriented. And clearly in this case, they were more impressed with the people oriented person. Is there, can you see, and we would normally just say, yeah, task oriented may be beneficial if the school is a bunch of new teachers or a very low performing school. Even if that's the case, Is it more advantageous to be a people-oriented person, or is there a shortcoming to being, quote, people-oriented? Anybody?
I think-
Go ahead, Stacey.
I'm sorry. I think sometimes if you're people oriented, and I am, people don't think that you have what it takes to get the tasks done. I do have that. But I instead of me working myself to death, what I like to do is surround myself with people who will work for me and who I can jihad with and get things done with. And that takes the people part. You got to have that. But I think a lot of people, when they see me, just because I am people oriented, they think that I can't maintain or manage the task part, but I can.
Yeah.
And so that's just, I think that's unfair that people see it that way.
I do too, Stacy, and I'm glad that you pointed that out. And this will wrap up this one, or if we're going to stay on time tonight. I want to encourage you all. I'm going to say something you already know, and that is that when we read these cases, when we study all kinds of leadership literature, there's always this discussion of being approachable and being the people person, of giving people opportunity to be decision makers and finding ways to delegate and all these things. We need to remember that every time we involve these things, you are slowing down the decision. And there are times when we have to be decisive. Leadership is about decisions. And so I agree 100%. When we are looking for leadership, we want leaders to be people, don't we? There's no question about that. But if we do that at the expense of recognizing the importance of achieving goals, if we or doing the things that we've got to do to get from here to here, then we will fail as an organization. There are a lot, Dale says it all the time. There are a lot of good people that are in the wrong profession. It doesn't make them a bad person. It means they're not cut out to do what they're charged to do. And so, friends, always remember, the organization has hired you and me to accomplish certain things. Parents expect it, students expect it, coworkers expect it, community expects it. We have to get things accomplished. And that is a part of being task oriented as well. So I don't think that I didn't like this case too much, because I think you kind of portraying one against the other. I like a person who comes in and says, boom, 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 boom. I would have probably hired the people person too, but I'll tell you, somebody with a plan sure is nice to hear sometimes. So let's go on to the next one. Case 3, and that is Alice, Mary, and Andy. We'll come back. We're going to come back. We're going to do one with each group and then come back around.
All right, so share my screen. Okay. So with case 3, the question of the chapter was, is test practice effective instruction? And that kind of harkened back to one of the case studies we talked about last week in the principal book.
Yes.
And so kind of the nuts and bolts of what was in the chapter was one district hired a former school administrator to develop a countywide testing program with the goal of improving test scores. So that was the superintendent's vision. That was the reason for the hire. And Sandra has great ideas. And when she made her presentation, she talked about listening to school staff, attending the state level testing meetings, relaying information back to each school, seeking advice from administrators and teachers, and then also doing a survey for parents and students. At the meeting, she answered questions from all the stakeholders and said that everyone must do test practice. So at the end of the meeting, everyone was refreshed. She had addressed everybody's kind of concerns. One parent was concerned about her gifted kid. And Sandra's solution was to use higher order thinking, which I don't know why we're not using that already, but they weren't. And the principal was concerned about integrating the test prep in, and her idea was maybe we make a 0 period before school. And so she has an answer for everybody's question, but if it comes back to, is it effective instruction? I mean, if we're teaching standards aligned activities, we're doing test prep embedded in the learning already, and that would be effective. But if we're talking about a whole separate kind of, we're just going to do test prep, as like a completely separate entity, I don't necessarily think that's effective instruction. But caveat there, if this was the district mandate, then don't we kind of have to do what the district office says we have to do? Any thoughts on all that?
All right, so the question to me on this case is, number one, I love the first question. Why would an audience consider this meeting refreshing? Why would an audience consider the meeting refreshing?
I think because they got heard, their voices were heard, their concerns were heard, and somebody had an answer for them that maybe they haven't gotten before.
I don't know what your experience is in your respective districts. Test coordinators sometimes are a different breed in that they enjoy, unless they were placed there against their will, but for the most part, they enjoy, the data analysis, the reporting of results, almost the adrenaline rush of getting these results and seeing how we did and those kinds of things. Here's one that is presenting material and ideas that is not your standard cut and dry. Here's the test we're giving, and here's the protocols in place, and blah blah blah. So that it does seem that there's a little bit of interaction with this test person. Okay, so we go beyond that. Here's the question. What do you 10 are curricular people. What are your thoughts? And we did talk about this, Mary, you're exactly right, about test taking practice and how much time do we put into that?
Well, speaking for myself, I mean, the English curriculum lends itself very well to teaching kids how to answer like longhand through essay, the analysis of theme. So then I take like 2 or 3 days at the very end and talk about how do you pick out theme in a multiple choice situation. But I've also been at a school where they took a smart lunch time and made every junior go to SAT, ACT prep during their lunch for half of it. That wasn't effective.
I bet not.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. Number one, if you want to fatten up a hog, do you feed him or do you weigh him?
Yeah.
That you got to teach. You can't just weigh them all the time. The testing part, and the second part, the second piece is, and I know you folks are highly intelligent. Somebody explained to me the statistical theory of regression to the mean.
Well, that's a Jennifer question.
And if you understand that concept of regression to the mean, you understand that gains simply by practicing the test or the ability or test taking strategies, that over time those will regress back to where you were if you don't at the same time teach them more. So if you want them to know more math and do better on a math test, they have to know more math. And so it's that regression of the mean that we're trying to beat here. We want them to be prepared for the test, but we have to actually teach them as well. And so we can't just focus on practice test taking all the time. and the skill and drill, because there's not a lot of content that gets transferred during that time. So the question is this, and I may have, if I'm boring you with this, that's probably my intention. But when we do the retests and we don't have any actual re-instruction from the time they take the first test to the time they take the retest, what are we hoping for? So kid takes the test on Tuesday and he makes 65 and he's got to make 70 to pass. You know, you're trying to get the number on grade level. And so the kids that scored 65, 66, 67, 68, and 69, we let them retest for the opportunity to try to get that 70. Are we thinking that they've learned more math in that 24 hours since the last test? What are we hoping for there? We're hoping for luck. I mean, that's part of it. Is luck. We're hoping for luck. We're hoping that they guess a few more right. And so we let them take the retest. Now, why can't we, under the concept, the statistical concept of regression to the mean, why can't we add, if we have 5 more that pass the test on the second administration, why can't we add them to our overall percentage of the ones that pass the test? You know, that's what we get evaluated on in schools. Why can't we add those 5 to the 50 that passed the first time and our percentage go up 2 or 3 points? Why can't we do that? Well, under the theory of regression to the mean, we can't add the ones that we gave a second chance to get lucky, because we didn't make the ones who scored 71, 2, 3, and 4. We didn't give them the chance to be unlucky. That's why we can't add that. And so if we tested them all, the percentage would be the same. Now, some of the kids would cross the line. Some of them would guess a few more right, some would guess a few more wrong. And so the whole notion here is we're trying to avoid the guessing. We're trying to avoid just simply practicing skill and drill kids to the point where in the end, they're just guessing all the time. And we're just teaching them test-taking strategies. That can take over your school. It can take over your instructional department. It can become your instructional initiative if you're not careful. Used in small amounts, it's okay to get kids ready for the test, but that can't be your instructional program. And unfortunately, if we think a little bit's good, we think a lot's even better. And so that's, as administrators, we have to be careful and monitor this, in that you know, we studied a little bit, we skilled and drilled, we got a couple more to get past the test. Well, if we just did a little bit more, maybe and pretty soon we see our numbers start to regress back down, because we're not teaching math, we're teaching how to take the math test. That therein lies our problem. And that's what school administrators have to be most careful and watch. Again, you already know we're not instructional experts, but those are the kinds of things that when you move from the instructional role to the administrative role, those are the things you've got to watch, because it becomes very easy for that to become your instructional program.
So the last comment on this is that as Mary pointed out, we kind of talked about this from the principal book. We're talking about it again. You folks are really, really ahead of the game with your instructional knowledge, your teaching and learning acumen. And that is what we are about. We don't need you or me or Dale to push how to take a test. We need you to help us help teachers have the ability to deliver instruction to students to make them more effective. And that is why you're going to be great at what you do. And as we have said many times, that is why when Dale and I were principals, yes, we learned a lot in our experience, but we were depending on somebody else also to help us help teachers do better at teaching and ensuring that students were getting it. So I think that, again, it was refreshing to have somebody who would listen. I hope that district did not fall into the trap of just constantly doing released test items and to see how that would work. So, all right, thank you. Group 2, group 3 is Jennifer, Elizabeth, and Heather. And we are part 1, the principal as the instructional leader.
Heather, will you share for me, please?
Yes, I'm trying to get it pulled up. It's taking.
Okay. All right, so we had cases 7, 8, and 24. And so our first one was the principal as the instructional leader. We had the school population was changing and scores were declining. Specifically, one of the big ones was reading scores. The former principal was a real big relationship builder and would always let the kids read. He would listen to them reading. 3/4 of the students that were coming in now they had below reading average. So the big change here was a lot of the people had heard that this school, was a really good school, and they had started moving in, but the ones who were moving in were some that their kids had, lower scores and were not at the right reading average. But then this new principal came in and met with small groups of teachers, and he wanted to find out the strengths and the weaknesses. And he listened to parents. He created a curriculum committee of 4 teachers, 1 in the upper grades, 1 in the lower grades, 1 specials teacher, and 1 faculty chair. The staff, majority of them had 10 or more years of teaching experience at the school. And there were 4 months in asking for a discipline policy, and this was from the teachers. The teachers had been asking after about 4 months of this new principal being active there, they were wanting a new discipline policy. So Heather, will you go to the next slide for me, please? So some of the situations here with how, things were declining and the scores were suffering and all these new people were coming in. The principal he tried to diagnose the issues first and develop a course of action with the stakeholders, making sure that the instruction was effective. Because, effective instruction can help avoid discipline issues. And nowhere in this one did it say that, he met with these 4 or had this committee of 4 people, but to me, being honest about it, I don't know that 4 people was enough when you only have 1 representative from each area. So to me, that seemed like a very small group to be dealing with. But then again, I could be wrong on that. But the students, the big thing is that students who enjoy learning are not usually discipline issues. Was one solution that was talked about, and the power of personality, having a realistic code of behavior, talking to discipline offenders, having workshops for parents, and involving others were some possible things here. And with the questions, it said, how could Frank handle the low reading scores that came about with the large number of students entering the school with low reading scores? And I think that the idea of creating kind of like you always say, Dr. Law, is a task team to help with that. But I think that 4 people might not have been enough, or that, there might need to be more discussion about it and have more of a communication about it. But another question was, what are some measures that he could take to avoid major discipline problems in the school? And I think that being in the classrooms and making sure that he knows how the teachers are teaching would be a very good start, because if, like you'd said before, if you don't know what's going on in your school and you don't know, and you don't have those observations and know what's going on, if they're teaching effectively or not teaching effectively, then that may be the biggest issue right there. Because if they're teaching effectively within the classroom, then more than likely the behavior should improve, and there'd be less discipline issues to worry with. The last question, in addition to strengthening the reading and discipline plans, what else could Frank do to maintain the school as an excellent place to attend? I think being a good communicator and, making sure that there is that piece of having that collaboration between home, school, and and having that, what is it that we had? Family, community, and school, where we had the FCEP that we did, about where that triangle of communication needs to happen and happen well. And if there's one of those places that's weak, some stuff's going to fall off and it not be as strong as it needs to be. But that was my take on this one.
So if you are new to a school as a leader, and we have issues with academic performance, and we have issues with school culture, with discipline, with just total behavioral issues. Given the choice, we're underperforming in instruction with academic achievement, and we have behavior issues. Which one do you tackle first?
If the classroom is an engaging place that the kids want to be, and then it should help some of that discipline decline. Because if somebody likes being in their class and they have a place that they're excited about going to, then maybe they won't cause as many issues.
So you tackle the overall discipline culture before you tackle the academic culture?
No, I'm saying that if you fix the academic piece of it, like seeing what's going on in the classrooms, so that, that it's a good and, inviting place that the kids want to be, then it should help fix some of the discipline issues.
All right, now Jennifer, I like that answer. I think everybody likes that answer. I would imagine that all 10 of you have dealt with some turds in your class. And I'm quite certain if you don't think you are a good teacher, I will tell you you are, because I know you are. So given that, you still, Jennifer, I'm not arguing with you. I just want to, so you think that this principal needs to visit classrooms early on and determine if it's an engaging classroom, that's going to solve both issues simultaneously?
I think it'd give a better insight as to if that is going to be the main thing that needs to be addressed first. Because nowhere in here did it say anything about if that had been done. So I think that would be the first step that needs to happen. Because if you don't know what's going on in your school and you're not aware, then there is absolutely no way then you can start to tackle the issues.
All right, so I'm gonna take it one. I agree. One last question on this, and I'm gonna do it for all three of you, so that Jennifer can get off the hot seat just a minute. But you answer it too, Jennifer. So you're new to the school. All 10 of you are new principals at a school. And the first thing that the faculty says is, we got to get a hold of this place. We want a discipline plan. We want you to provide. That's the first thing. Now you see a litany of things that need to be corrected. And the first thing they say is, we want a discipline plan. How do you react to that?
I would listen to a committee of the faculty and ask, what types of things they're seeing that they feel that discipline is needed for. For example, if it is dress code, that's a big issue, or if it's kids going and destroying the bathrooms, like what we've had recently, or what the discipline specifics are that they are looking for, or if it's like kids that have been cursing out teachers in the classroom. I would want to know what the main pieces are first that have been issues before then making the plan to address them. Because, I mean, discipline has a broad range.
What does it say to you about the faculty you're inheriting if that's their biggest concern?
They may not have classroom control.
It kind of says to me too that they blame student behavior for lack of success.
Let me ask a question here. Are the characteristics of learners the same for kids that are above grade level and below grade level? You folks are curriculum experts. You should know the answer to this question. Are there,
Quick, it's a setup. It's a setup.
are their characteristics the same? So what happens in schools with changing demographics? We used to have these kind of kids and we taught them this way and we were successful. As the demographic changed, we still, you know, we're a one-trick pony. We still teach the same way. We're no longer successful because these kids have different characteristics, and all of a sudden we start having behavior issues in our classrooms where we never had them before. We think that the problem is behavior related, but it's actually instructionally related because we are not engaging these kids. That's our problem. The root of the problem, it might manifest itself in bad behavior, but the root of the problem is that we that we're not engaging these kids. The things that we used to do that work with the kids we used to have are not don't work with this group now. So they're in the root of the problem. So the question that you have to ask is, if kids behave better, do they automatically learn more? That would be no. If you want them to learn more, you have to teach them more. So just getting them to behave better won't make them learn more. Even if they're not engaged, they're not going to learn. And that begs the question. You know, we have tried external solutions like school uniforms. We thought if we put kids in uniforms, they'd learn more. No, that's just kids behaving badly, dressed similarly. That's all uniforms are. That may be, in my time in the business, my 40 years, that may be the single dumbest thing I've ever heard, is if we put kids in uniforms, they'll learn more. No, they'll learn more if you teach them more. But generally the core, you know, when we unravel this onion, you know, this ball of twine or whatever, when we get down to the core, we changed the demographics without changing the faculty or our teaching methodology, our instructional program, and it no longer fits the group that we have, and they're not engaged, and so the behavior. So the answer to the question, and this is from somebody from the other side of the aisle, by the way, I'm an operations person, y'all already figured out, but I can tell you, you can't fix your discipline problems until you fix your instructional problem first, and you've got a mismatch there is your issue.
Woohoo, I win.
Just for that, we'll get out 2 minutes early tonight. So I think that we use the term instructional leader rather loosely. I think we you know, the principal is the instructional leader. The principal is the #1 instructional leader. We keep repeating that. That's what this is talking about. That we have to be able to recognize that it's not that the principal understands your curriculum. It's that your principal understands how to enable you to deliver your curriculum. And that is the instructional leader. And so, again, if Dale and I succeed at all this semester, at the end of it, you ought to at the very least say, I can do this because you know all the tricks, you know all of the things that need to happen for teachers to have an opportunity to be successful with students. And that's the beautiful, except you don't know how to fix Phyllis's problem with her 4th grade student. But other than that, you know everything of what you can do. And maybe y'all know how to fix Phyllis's problem with her 4th grade student, but I don't know how to fix it. I can tell you that. So let's go back to group 1 with Rebecca and Stacy and Leah, and you are going to do case number 2.
Okay, yeah. All right. So this, whoa. Can you go back one, Leah? Oh, sorry, y'all. I'm sorry, Carl. Okay, Loretta and Karen were both appointed to,
Wait a minute. I need to understand something. So your dog knew to shut up just by you looking at it?
yes. No, my husband got the cat out of the box and put the cat down, and he
Okay,
started chasing the cat the other
all
way.
we've got is you on camera, and I saw the glare, and I'm sitting there saying, if that works with a dog, you are one impressive person.
No, Fabian got up and got the dog out of got the cat out. Hang on.
I shouldn't have said anything. All right, y'all need to put me on probation. I should not have brought that up.
You did that. All right.
Stacy's got the wild kingdom of animals at her house. This is what it
I
boils down
apologize.
to.
Carl Weezer's my grand dog, and he's a rescue, and he has issues, and we're trying to accommodate the dog, but he just tried to kill Cheeto in the box, but it's okay. Can I talk about these people? Karen, which I thought was funny, and Loretta were both appointed to 2 separate schools, Springfield and Bell Avenue, by the superintendent. Okay, equally strong records. Both of the schools were similar, and the fast forwarded all the way to a year later, and it's time for evaluation. Loretta at Springfield has had a lot of success, but Karen's school has declined, and lots of teacher turnover, no teacher leadership, no parent participation, everything went bananas. And at Loretta's school, people started, of course, Karen declined. I know, that's what I thought was funny too, Andy. But at Loretta's school, she's seen some success. People, the enrollments increased, grant writings going on, positive parent surveys. She's getting community support. After review, the superintendent noticed that these ladies had different leadership styles, and I can't see the bottom of that. And I don't know if it's my fault or not, but basically, Karen was real tight. Her shit was real tight. She wanted, if anything new was going to go on in the building, it had to come through her. And Loretta, on the other hand, allowed for a little free thinking from her teachers. She gave them enough information that if they needed to write a grant to get some new equipment, then she was all about that. It didn't have to come through her office. It was just one of those things. And a little less hands-on maybe was her approach. And we had some questions about that on the next slide. I think.
Sorry, I'm here. I lost my mouse for a second.
All right. But anyway, we discussed these questions and I think, is it Rebecca or this Leah, is this yours?
I thought this was mine.
Or it might be Ann's. I don't know.
All
I'm
right.
just in charge of presenting. So.
So basically it says, you know, what other factors might the superintendent use to evaluate both principals during and after their first year of services? How would you assess the leadership cycle styles of Loretta and Karen? And what specific advice would you offer them to enhance their management capabilities? How can both individuals be supported to maximize their positives? But the rest of this chapter, you know, goes on to talk about talent multipliers and diminishers. So we would have to say that Loretta was a talent multiplier because just like what Dr. Laws just said, administration does not need to know your curriculum. I actually wrote down what he said. Administration does not need to know your curriculum. It needs to know how to enable you to teach your curriculum. And so, you know, opposite of Karen, who is kind of micromanaging, it seems that Loretta understands how to support and, you know, encourage. Also, I thought it was interesting what Stacy said earlier about her being a people person and that she can maximize getting tasks done and that she likes to bring people together to, you know, hash things out and then use everybody's talents, which I think, Stacy, obviously makes you a talent multiplier. And then these are the things that we kind of thought that would be good. We could assign Karen a mentor. We could maybe have a new principals group facilitated by somebody other than the superintendent to build collaborative relationships and problem solve together. Organize and host principal professional development and involve Karen's faculty and staff to express their needs toward positive work changes. They could also consider their hiring process. You know, they might want to add something in that district, like Dr. Lamb said about a collaboration task to actually like see them work in a group and see how they encourage others. Dr. Lamb, you said that, right? Yeah. And that's it. I'm
Always
gonna.
good when he's muted. We need to take.
Yes, I did
I
say
saw
that.
I saw his
Yeah.
thumbs up.
I know, and that's the shortest answer you'll ever get from him. So it was really good to see that he was. muted.
And I only have 4 people on my screen right now, and I'm one of them. And luckily, Dr. Lamb is also one of them.
Yeah. I think so. This is a good follow-up case from case 1, and so my question on this one is, if I mean, Karen has some issues, right? And
Did you step on something? Sorry.
that she's struggling a bit as a first-year principal. What if, I mean, so the faculty is frustrated. Here's Karen in this leadership role. What if Karen was the hands down favorite of the faculty and got the principalship, and now they're complaining about it? What do you do as a superintendent? Now, I agree this is not a superintendent program or a district leadership program, but what would you do as a superintendent if this is who the faculty want? And now it was a lead balloon. It was terrible. What do you do?
I don't
I
know.
love
what
it,
to do.
Mary.
I don't think it's particularly, I mean, I know that we've talked about it a lot, like opening it up to faculty. But I just think that we don't know the educational background of all of our faculty members, and we don't know if they know what being a good leader is. And I just think that it's possibly not the best idea to ask the faculty to help pick the principal. I don't know, maybe that's the wrong answer again.
I think
right,
they can
so-
be a part of a collaborative group that might do it, but I think you're exactly right, and I don't think it's a good idea just to let them pick. They may not be picking for the right reasons. That's a great point.
Some of you, at least one of you, I'm certain has experience, well, I'm not certain, but I would be willing to bet that at least one of you has experienced a promotion from within, an assistant principal who became the principal. And the person who was the assistant principal is not the same person that is now the principal. That they have their whole personality, their demeanor, their way of operating has totally changed. And this assistant principal, who I thought was going to be the best thing in the world for this school, now is Cruella de Vil. And it's a disaster. And sometimes we understand that this is an example of somebody who was really good at this, but now has been promoted to something beyond their comfort level or even their ability level in some places. And you know, when we get into Maxwell, the first one, whoever's got number one is the law of the lid. We're going to talk about the law of the lid. I mean, we all have lids, and sometimes we have to recognize that. Faculties need to be very careful about pushing their assistant principal to get the principalship at that school, because it doesn't always work the way we thought it would work. And I will tell you, I have done it one time in the years I was a superintendent, and it was disaster with a big D. And I did it early on, and I vowed then it would never happen again, and it did. And because it's not fair to the person being promoted. And what happens oftentimes is that you know, faculty thinks they want it. Assistant principal thinks she or he wants it. And it's just not an easy transition. You're in a totally different role. So but that really doesn't have anything to do with this. I think that Karen, what we learned from this is, I think it's a bigger case study than what they went with. Yes, we can put protocols in place to help Karen, but we really need to, we all make, Dale will even admit, and I certainly admit more often than I would like, we have made incorrect hires. I mean, it happens. And it's obviously not intentional, and you try to do everything in your power not to do that, but it will happen. Karen may well have been a poor hire. That was not what we needed at that time. By the way, there may be schools where Karen would fit in, but this is not the one. So I think the biggest issue here is we need to go back to case one and say we got to get protocols in place to really get to know the candidate. I'm going to close this again, and you will hear me say it till you're sick of, well, you're already sick of hearing me. The principal position, in my opinion, is the most important hire in a school district. The teachers deserve it, the students deserve it, the community deserves it. We've got to take the time it takes to get the right person and put the protocols in. And I don't think that happened in this case. So
I have a quick question. So I was faced with a challenging situation once where a teacher was not evaluated up to par, and it got so bad that the administration just said, you know, you teach 7th grade math and teaches 7th grade math. We just want you to do exactly what Ann is doing. Like, whatever lesson she is teaching, that's what you're teaching that day. Like, literally, you're doing what Ann is doing. So would it be completely inappropriate to say to a principal, okay, I want you to get with Loretta. I want you guys to have some time together, and I want you to put into place what she's doing.
My answer would be absolutely not. There are a number of reasons. I think you can have mentors. So I think you're right about that. And I think if you were put in that position, you certainly could mentor that other teacher that you were working with. There are other factors. Number one, your group of students may not be the same as that other teacher's group of students. Number two, you know, I admire it. I'm going to be serious for a second. If I could be more like Dale Lamb as a principal when I was a principal, I would have really felt good about myself, because I know the quality of the schools he ran and how he led them and what the teachers thought. The truth of the matter is, I can't be Dale Lamb.
Right.
And so we've got to be very careful on that kind of strategy. But you know what, Ann, I've heard a number of times where we've said that to people, right? You go shadow this person and learn all you can from them. And that may work in some ways. I think the sharing of lesson ideas and teaching techniques is a great thing to share. But I think that was a mistake if the principal told you to do that. It's a compliment to you, but it's a mistake in my opinion.
And I didn't like it, because then I felt like I was under the microscope too.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a question, and then you can go into that. Of all the things that were Karen's shortcomings that were listed on the first slide, which do you think is the worst that dooms you to failure as a principal? Which of those transgressions on that first slide?
What were they again, Stacy? Can you read them off again?
Actually, Leah, can you flip that slide up there? I have to look at them. I can't remember exactly what each one of them was.
Well, I want to answer based on one of the things that it says in the book, and it doesn't say this in exact words, but it says manager diminishers are tyrants who create a tense environment that suppresses people's thinking and capabilities, which produces straitjacket thinking. And that's what I think she's doing.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I've worked in a school like that, so
I have too.
Yeah, and I'm going to go on record saying I don't know what your thoughts are, Dr. Lamb, but that, to me, that's the worst thing a principal can do.
To me, that's
that?
the
I'm sorry.
Tie the hands of the people that work for them in their school. Tie the hands of them.
and suppress people's thinking and capabilities.
And not listen to ideas.
Okay. Todd Whitaker, I don't know if y'all studied Todd very much in C&I. He wrote one of the seminal works of the 21st century. I'll hit Steve with the backhand here. What great principals do differently. And he's kind of the guru on empowering teachers as school leaders. There's 5 phases: teach other faculty members, be involved in curriculum, be involved in the school improvement team, be involved in budget, and be involved in personnel. But to me, the key on this one is, and the kind of the takeaway that we should all remember is, no evidence of teacher leadership, not empowering teachers, micromanaging them, not letting them try things, not allowing them to be creative or thoughtful in their instruction, expecting everybody to do exactly the same thing. what Ann was just talking about. You do what that one does. She's successful for whatever reason, and I don't know why, because I'm not smart enough as the leader to know why she's successful. Just do what she does. But that's an absence of teacher empowerment, big E empowerment as a school leader. That's what all this emanates from, I'm afraid, is this notion of I've got to have tight control. I've got to be in charge. Everybody has to know every day that I'm the boss. It's the actual opposite of servant leadership or transformational leadership. It's more managerial leadership, and that is okay to have a piece of that, but that can't be your leadership style. But so I think you're exactly right here. The key is the faculty is not empowered, and they're just marking time. And then this is what happens when faculty aren't happy, don't show up, don't feel empowered and facilitated in the building. This is what you get. But to the point that Steve made, it's really hard. When a faculty says we want this person, how do you know they want them for the right reason? Well, that's my friend, and they'll be my buddy or whatever. But even making thoughtful decisions, sometimes you just pick the wrong person. One of the worst hires I ever made was one of our own student teachers. That's one of the worst hires I ever made. She was a tremendous student teacher, but as soon as she got the job full time, and she wasn't, I don't mean this to be ugly, she wasn't a young person. I would say that she was on the precipice. She was nearly 40. She was getting out to be middle-aged, whatever you want to call it. And so she wasn't a kid. And she was a dynamite student teacher. And then just as soon as I hired her as the full-time teacher, she was sorry and well dirt. I mean, show up late, leave early, didn't do anything while she was there. I did that. I hired her for the right reasons, but it didn't turn out well. Sometimes it just doesn't turn out well. But the key kind of, if principals don't empower their teachers to be teachers and be leaders in the building, rarely will you can't overcome that. You just can't. And so that would, in my opinion, be her worst transgression. But Steve is right. Sometimes it's just not a good fit. Sometimes you just hired the wrong person. Sometimes the Peter principal, they're above, the law, the lid. They were good APs because that's basically a technician level job, but principal is a leadership job. And they're just not equipped to do that. Unfortunately. And again, as superintendent, what would you do? Would you try to work with this Karen? That is a lovely alliteration that she is a Karen. Would you try to work with this Karen, or would you cut your losses and move on?
I think I'd try to work with her, but I would probably need to know, do a strengths assessment and find out, if what she had that I could work with. She obviously, you can always, if she micromanages, then she is task oriented. So maybe we could, figure out, and I think somebody put in the chat about, find out where she's strong and then, and where she's weak, and then put somebody in there with her to work who maybe possesses the strengths that she's weakest in. I don't know,
Dr. Laws, what do you think about that?
Well, I think, first of all, the wisdom of the first contracts that you receive as administrator, at least in North Carolina, is the first contract's a 2-year contract. And I think that we acknowledge that the first year is going to have some bumps in it. And so I would not cut my losses unless it was just, there could be things that will cause it, but it'd be very rare to get to that point. So I think to cut the loss after first year is a mistake. And you do put those things in place to see if they can transition to being more effective. And and get the faculty to work with the principal, and certainly the principal to work with the faculty to achieve that goal. And we'll just see how it works. If it doesn't work, then the not renewing the contract is an easy thing. Now, the argument can be made, you've wasted a second year. You know, again, if we've done our job on the hiring end, there's still going to be bumps in the road, but hopefully it's not to the point that we can't get some of it fixed. But I will tell you, if after you put protocols in place to get somebody to change their ways and to be a more effective leader and to work with faculty to make leaders of them and give opportunities, if that doesn't change after the second year, the old adage of a leopard doesn't change its spots it comes into play. And that's when you say, this ain't going to work. And you do not move that person to another school. I mean, you just say, it's not going to work. And they may be an effective assistant principal, and you can say you're going to be an assistant principal, but that would be my answer. I don't know that unless it was an unethical or immoral thing, or an illegal thing, that Dale will talk to you extensively about the second half of this semester. Unless it's one of those things, I don't think I would cut my loss after the first year. All right, so it will shock all of you to know that I'm not doing very well keeping up with time. You are going to get out at 8 o'clock tonight. So let's just keep our dialogue, and if we don't get all these covered tonight, we'll be all right. Thank you, Mary, for putting that up.
All right, so our second case was case study 5, which was called Good Communication is Essential. And note here was that communication can do a lot to boost or reduce teacher morale, school morale. So you've got a principal, you've got Joe Wilson, who was leading a faculty meeting, and he put faculty concerns on the agenda. And, you know, he asked, you know, for their concerns, and they just sat there and they didn't say anything until somebody who normally does not speak, somebody's very soft-spoken, Amy, she says, with all due respect, I have to say that I'm fed up with all the notices giving us more and more responsibilities, and especially paperwork to do. And then from there, after everybody kind of got over the shock of, wow, Amy just said something, you got another teacher that talks about the record keeping, the amount of record keeping they have to do, how you keep changing things last minute, the monumental amount of paperwork that we're given, giving us more and more, responsibilities. And then finally, a teacher says, we get notices that things are due last minute. So the principal is then overwhelmed. Okay, the principal is very overwhelmed. He starts shaking. He was clueless. He didn't realize that his teachers felt this way. And so he decided he wanted to do something to improve communication in the school. So you can go to the next one. So to work on improving the communication, that same group of teachers, everybody who spoke up in that faculty meeting, he invited them to sit down with him to brainstorm some ways to improve communication. They were all very appreciative. They showed up, and Amy spoke and said that to the principal, Mr. Wilson, we know you want to do your best here. We've always admired you and respected you since you first began working here, but this issue of communication has been getting worse and bothering us terribly. When you gave us the opportunity to share out concerns, I just burst out hoping that you would listen and help us. And everybody just nods their head because they want it to be better. And they were excited that somebody was going to listen. And so then the principal from that decided that they would really be able to work together to come up with good solutions. So the text asked a couple of questions. The first one was, considering the outburst, was it wise for Principal Wilson to include faculty concerns in the agenda? I mean, wise is, I think, relative here. I don't think he knew that they felt that way. So when he put it on there, I don't know what he was expecting. I'm not psychic. I don't know what he was thinking, but they kind of exploded at him. So then second, it says evaluate Principal Wilson's reaction to the criticism. I mean, I probably would have been the same way had I not known, and everybody kind of, once again, exploded at me in a faculty meeting about how awful communication is and getting things last minute, and paperwork's always an issue. Teachers always feel it's too much paperwork. They always feel that way. I mean, at my school anyway, they do. So then I wrote here in the slide, should the principal have known how the teachers felt? And then what solutions could they come up with? And some of the ones that I had written down were they could brainstorm with teachers at that faculty meeting or in those groups like he was doing. I thought that was a good idea to sit down with the concerned teachers and kind of committee. Emails ahead of time, not last minute, because that's just never a good thing. They talked about intercom interruptions in this and how they were tired of being interrupted. I know that they mentioned in the text that sometimes schools even will shoot text messages to their teachers. And I said that would be fine at my school. If the school system was okay with it, if the teachers were okay with it. And then back to those advisory committees that could meet throughout the year to advise best on communication, update the principal on how things are actually going and how teachers are actually feeling, because teachers will talk to teachers. They may not want to talk to administrators, but teachers talk to each other. And so they could kind of update the principal, come up with better solutions. And I like the idea of getting parents involved with communication too, because if communication is that bad within the school, it can be assumed that the parents are probably not finding out things in a timely manner too.
This case is relevant. I guess all of them are, but this one is particularly relevant in light of what you folks are dealing with on a daily basis. A lot of you hide it well, but it is hard to find somebody happy in their work right now in a school. And I know you're taking that the way I intended. It's hard to be happy right now. And if your principal stands up in front of you and opens the floor for concerns, it's going to be a long meeting and nothing else is going to be accomplished. So I would first of all say that the principal may have been surprised at the outpouring of concerns. That's the principal's fault, in my opinion. Secondly, I don't believe, again, you may have a differing opinion and Dale may as well. We have not discussed these cases. I don't believe you spend time in a faculty meeting opening it up for tell me all that's wrong. Because it takes a life of its own then. And you go from one person talking to, well, since she opened the door, blah, 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 blah. And since he said that, blah, 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 blah. And it just keeps on going. And interesting enough, I won't go into the detail, but that's what I'm on church council at our church. And we've got an issue now. And so there's, it's taking a life of its own. And I'm getting these calls and it's just, so now the calls are, what are you going to do about it? And my response is nothing. And next week it'll be something else. So, it's not an immoral act or anything like that. It was a decision. So here's the thing. Let's go back to every case we've done, and then I'll ask for comments. Every case we've done, we've talked about the importance of recognizing teacher leadership. if this principal has really empowered teachers so that there is this comfort level that Stacy can come in and say, Steve, I just want you to know that we, not they, we are frustrated with the amount of blah, blah, blah that you are expecting. Can we talk about it? That's why you have a school improvement team or a leadership team at your school. That's why you pick people that are totally comfortable going to the principal with concerns and expressing them without fear that they're going to pay a price for it, and without fear from the faculty that this person is not going to represent their concerns. This is communication. It should never have gotten to that point. But if you start spending your faculty meetings or even your school improvement team meetings with, okay, what's wrong today? Then you're not getting the business of the school done. Now, the next thing you're going to say is, well, Steve, you start our class, well, tell me stories. Well, remember, you all are in different regions, in different locations, and there is comfort in hearing that others are experiencing the same things you are. Not a great deal of comfort because you got to experience it on your own too, but there is comfort with that. That's why Dale and I do it. At a school, we're all a family compact in that facility working together. There ought to be other means where you don't spend time in meetings just griping and complaining. Rather, we will have that forum through the school improvement team leader or a leader on our faculty that can communicate and get things going. So I think it was handled poorly by the principal. There's not much that the principal did in this case that I totally agree with. So anybody got a comment on that?
A good rule of thumb for faculty meetings is dominoes. 30 minutes or less, or it's free. That means we have to give you the next week off if we went over the 30 minutes. So that's kind of it. As just a matter of course, who knows what the main tenet of emotional intelligence is? We talk about that being very crucial for leadership. It's emotional intelligence. What is the main tenet of emotional intelligence? That would be self-awareness. Obviously, the principal's not very self-aware, so that's a problem, and you have to work on that, on your self-awareness, and understand that's a very limiting factor for a leader. If you're not self-aware, you're not emotionally intelligent, you don't know what's going on, you get blindsided like this. And you should never get blindsided. You shouldn't. It's like a good attorney. You should never ask the question you don't already know the answer to. But if you give people the chance to vent and digress, they will. And so it's not that we don't want feedback, but we have to limit the forum, and we have to do it in more constructive ways than people just pitching a fit and doing that. But again, not very self-aware. And that's a real limiting factor for a school administrator, more so than content knowledge is a lack of awareness.
What might be a better way to get that information if you're a principal? I mean, I know we said like school improvement councils or whatever and setting up committees, but I mean, how does a principal come up with that? Well, your AP sent a Google survey. People, we talked about surveys in our group discussion. People aren't as honest in survey situations as they should be. So, I mean, what do y'all suggest that we do to make ourselves? Okay.
It's not against the rules for the principal to rotate through the PLCs every week, is it? That's your best form, because those people will have common problems because they're in common areas. By far, I mean, DeFore has a charge session that goes beyond how to set up. It's how to manage multiple, from a leadership perspective, how to manage multiple PLCs, and that's Richard Ford, I mean, that's the notion here, is that PLCs, once you, from the leadership perspective, become a feedback engine for you as well. And a way to work with people in small groups to, about their concerns and issues. But again, the focus goes back to instruction. If I'm put in a position as a principal to choose between teacher comfort or what's right for kids, what have I got to pick every time? What's right for kids? And if this feedback loop is through the lens of a PLC, we're always looking at what's best for kids. So, and if we can keep that focus on what's good for kids, what's best for them, and through that PLC, that's the vehicle that I think is by far the best. Nothing else that I know is as good as that.
I think there's one other piece with this, and again, not to steal all the thunder from the Maxwell thing, but one of you has the law of intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that and one of the things we will discuss with the law of intuition is are women more intuitive than men? And we'll have a good discussion of that, not to stereotype all people, but as a whole, are women more intuitive than men? Dale and I will be the first to say it is really hard to get by with a lie to our wives. They can figure it out, but they could lie to us and we would never know in a million years. So it's and some of that I'm being facetious, and I think you know that, but the some of it I'm not, but the intuition piece. If I went around the room and said, are you a good reader of people? I think that one of the real strengths that good principals have is that they can read people. And at some point, you can recognize something's wrong. Something's wrong with my relationship with this person or these people. Something is not as good as it needs to be, and you can feel it. And the good principal feels it. And I would bet that you folks have that talent too. When you do a class, when you are teaching a class or leading a seminar or a PD, you have the feeling whether or not it's working. You can tell whether or not it's working. Same goes with the principal. They ought to know, every principal ought to know it's working or it's not working. And if it's not working, then begin the idea of finding out why. And just in the short time we've been together, you folks have, I think, been comfortable to tell Dale and me what you think of this assignment, or what you'd like to have instead, or what we could do with this or that. That's what we want. I mean, we may argue back, but still, I don't think any of you said, "Oh God, we can't say that." It's the same as, so first of all, the principal needs to give the opportunity for that to happen, where people can tell you what they think. But the second is be intuitive. It's one of the laws that Maxwell will talk about, and we will enjoy talking about it. All right, we're going to get one more case done, whether we want to or not. So we're ready for case 8, and this will be our last one. I guess we're not going to get all these cases done. Dale, which 4 cases do you center on the second half? Do you know the numbers off the top? You're muted. He's still muted. Isn't it wonderful when he's muted? You're muted, Dale.
I'm trying to get it to come off here. I don't use any from this
better,
book.
buddy.
I use different ones because we don't want to repeat 601 to 603. I do, well, cheating strike Bobby out, the superintendent's letter on funding. I do the Jimmy and Willie, the LGBTQ, and then I do the last one on inclusion EC. Those are the 4 that I do.
All right. I was just gonna see if some of these were repetitive with what we're doing and trade them out. So I'll look at them. All right, let's do case 8 as our last one tonight. See, I had it structured right when I was doing 2 per class. So that, at least I had that timed right. Y'all need to give me that much credit, not any more than that much credit. All right, last case, number 8, for Jennifer, Elizabeth, and Heather, please.
Hey, Heather, could you screen share, please?
Absolutely.
All right, so case 8 was the principal as the instructional leader, part 2. So the problem in this case was there's lots of teachers who are demoralized and tired. There's lots of angry parents. But there was one teacher that everybody looked up to and just loved, and that was the PE teacher. And he had a really good reputation with students, parents, and staff. So when the previous principal retired, he's like, hey, you should be principal. So went through the whole interview process, got selected, was appointed new principal, but the superintendent gave him 2 warnings. Said, you're going to have to get firm with your friends, because he was such a people person and friend with all staff. Now he's in a leadership position, so it's going to be, that transition can sometimes be hard, especially with that line. And the second one was, your reading scores are poop, so we need to get those up. So him as a new principal and having a PE background and not having that strength in curriculum and instruction, especially in reading, he met with staff and addressed the 2 issues and was very open and said, look, this is not my forte, so I need your input. How would you like for me to address them? So he was honest with his staff as far as, you know, I'm in a leadership position. How would you like for me to kind of treat you all? And then as far as the reading, the staff suggested that he partner up with the reading coordinator about getting a new reading program and doing the research and attending conferences and choosing the best program for the school. And they both created an action plan and followed through with implementation. So he's like, well, let's get on board with reading, and then later down the road, we can do the same thing with math and social studies and science. So after a while, the scores began to increase. So before we get to the solution, oh, go back, Heather. Some of the questions were, what do you think the way James handled this particular situation, considering his limited background? So I think he approached it pretty well. He was open with his staff as far as, you know, admitting that reading wasn't his strength and he was going to need help. I think, in my opinion, that a leader who is able to tell me that that's not your strength and ask for help, it makes me respect you a little more, because you're not acting like a know-it-all. You don't assume that you know everything and can do everything. So I think that was a good thing for this principal to do. I'll go ahead to the next slide, Heather. So the solution that the authors gave us was using the reading coach was a good idea. Made staff take ownership of improvement process by involving them in it. Wasn't just like, here's what we're going to do, deal with it. It was, what can we do? So they worked together. Communication was open, which has been in line with every other case that we've been talking about, especially the last one, because like nobody was blindsided in this case study. And just involving the staff showed the staff that he valued their input. So not only was he a stellar PE teacher, it looks like he's on the road to being a stellar principal. And that's all I got.
I agree, Elizabeth. I think he did a lot of things correctly. here's my question. In my professional career, I was a high school person and did 5 years at what was then junior high school, then went back to high school. And I mean, that was high school as the initial part of my career, and then assistant principal. Then 5 years as a junior high school principal, then the remainder as a high school principal, and then the rest of it. So if after retirement, I just was blessed to, I mean, if Debbie and I moved out of state and I wanted a job and I went and applied, and for some moment of weakness, they hired me at an elementary school to be principal. Should I go in to the faculty and say, I need y'all to know, I'm not an elementary person. I don't know anything about elementary school curriculum or even really in how to deal with a 6-year-old. But I'll support you, but I need you to handle these things. Should I do that?
No, I don't think you should. I think you should make an
That's what this guy
effort,
did, isn't it? I mean, he said, I don't know anything about reading.
but he made an effort. Like, he was honest about not reading not being a strength, but he made an effort by partnering up with the reading coach and learning more about reading.
I'm gonna make an effort, Elizabeth. I'm gonna say, Elizabeth, I don't know anything about these little kids.
Relationships were already built.
So they already knew he didn't know anything about reading.
Well, and
He
this
was a
one,
PE coach, wasn't he? Come on, he doesn't know how to read.
All right, go gentle.
but with this one, even he already knew the staff. He already had relationships with the staff. He was already a trusted person. Going in the situation you're saying, that you're totally untrusted. Trust is your number one factor. In order to be able to communicate and have people follow you in whatever avenue you're going, that trust has to be there.
So is it better for me to say, I don't know elementary curriculum or even elementary children's way of being? Is it better to go ahead and admit it up front, or for you as a faculty to find out that I am ignorant?
I don't think there's anything wrong in asking for help, but you have to know who to ask and when to ask it.
I think that you should bring about some of your experiences to relate, even though they're not elementary, and also do some research and maybe observations to bring to the table. I don't think you should necessarily admit that you don't know what you're doing, because there's ways around that to bring in outside knowledge into the elementary school.
Well, I used elementary because that's me. I have no elementary experience. We could do any level that we chose. I told y'all before, I determined in my years in Wilkes County that early on that I would never hire a high school principal that didn't have elementary experience, because I was tired of listening to high school people complain that the elementary people didn't do their job. And so I wanted to make sure that they had that experience. So this foundational piece was understood. So now that may not be the right thing to do, but I determined that's what we're going to do. I'm just curious on this, and I don't think I agree. They knew this teacher. Again, this flies in the face of what I think is a difficult thing. You have promoted somebody from within that has a lot of buddies there on the faculty. That's a very difficult thing. He apparently did a really good thing, and he paired up with people and teamed people that would help him get to where he needed to be as a leader in understanding things and empowering them to help get to that point. But and so I think that that's the case. This idea of vulnerability is a thing that's discussed a lot. You've probably researched it some in your doctoral program in some area, and how much do we admit is a shortcoming of ours? And you know, my argument is that, I mean, I can admit a lot of shortcomings. Most of them are self-evident. I mean, you're readily evident. You're gonna pick up on the things that I'm not comfortable with quickly, and so I think that this idea of vulnerability needs to be more so of how do I put into place, how do you put into place ways to compensate for it. Leadership, to a great extent, is how we compensate for our weaknesses. And in fact, I don't know that there is a greater trademark of an effective leader than the ability to surround oneself with people who can take care of the things that we do not individually do well. And he did that. So the case is a good one, that you recognize your own shortcomings and attack it early on before you are put in a position of being criticized for it. And so I think if anybody was ever crazy enough to hire me to be an elementary principal, they were crazy enough to hire Dale to be one. If anybody were ever that crazy, I would have needed to have been the aggressor in making connections with people early on to compensate for my own recognition without having to say, look, folks, I mean, the truth of the matter is my resume ought to be out there. They ought to already know I hadn't done it. And his resume was already out there. He had never taught reading. So be the aggressor in dealing with your shortcomings. That's the lesson with that. I bet it's close to 8 o'clock. I don't have a clock up. So with that, I'm shutting up. Next week, go ahead and prepare your 3 cases. And we'll just not do the last one of tonight unless you're determined you want that. We won't, we're getting plenty of case studies, so we'll just do the 3 next week. We'll probably only get 2 of them done next week too, because Dale talks too much. And does anybody have any questions or comments as we wrap up? You never do at 8 o'clock. Dale, you got anything?
No, I was gonna tell a story, but I'll pass. It's too late.
Sometimes we need to be thankful that it's 8 o'clock. You'll hear it again, believe me. Everybody, we pray for you. We talked about that this morning. I know you think sometimes we just say things. We talked about your world at 8 o'clock this morning. We admire you. We're thankful for you. We pray for you. We hurt for you. And I hope you'll call on us if we can do anything. If you just need a listening ear, we're around. Otherwise, we will see you next Tuesday. And thank you for being with us tonight. Good night, everybody.
Yeah.